In today's video, I will show you 5 key ideas to turn the exchange variation of the Philidor into a fantastic weapon for black. In my previous video, I explained why the fried liver attack wasn't such a big deal against the Philidor. Yeah, we are not dealing with the main line. Against the Philidor, d4 is the main line, and this is what I'm going to cover today. I'm going to give you 5 ideas so you can play this variation in your games. And this is a fantastic line, a very practical one, as we are defining the position from move 3. Yeah, at move 3, we take on d4 and we get to the kind of position we are aiming for, taking white into our territory. So without further ado, let's see what is the exchange variation of the Philidor and how to play it. e4, e5, knight f3, d6, this is the Philidor. Yeah, we'll restrict our bishop a little bit, but gain the possibility of playing c6. That is very important to fight for the key square d5. And now against d4, this is the most important. In my previous video, I treat bishop c4, and we learned that knight f6 can be played without any fear, as knight g5 is answered by d5, e takes d5, and h6, taking advantage of the fact that the knight on b8 is not threatened on c6, and we gain a fantastic initiative. In case you haven't seen it, I highly recommend you do it. But okay, after d4, yeah, the idea is to capture e takes d4, knight takes d4, and yeah, white is a little bit, white pawn on e4, it's a little bit superior to our pawn on d6. Yeah, white controls more space and gives white an easier development. But we have certain ideas to put pressure on this pawn and to destroy the pawn. And the fact that we are in move 4 and we have defined the character of the game. So after e takes d4, knight takes d4, knight f6, knight c3, and bishop e7. Yeah, and we're ready to castle short. Yeah, now is white the one who has to decide how to play. Yeah, they have several moves, but I can divide those moves into big groups. Yeah, those that are devoted to castle on the king side, and the other moves that are devoted to castle long, to castle on the queen side. So bishop e2 is one move, bishop d3 is a normal move as well, bishop c4 are pretty normal, as g3 is. On the other hand, preparing long castle with bishop f4, queen d2 and long castle is absolutely normal. Some people consider it the main line. Bishop e3 with the same idea. Trying to play bishop e3 and queen d2 is not so special. And what is completely bad is bishop g5. Well, first of all, let's consider bishop e2. After castle, we may want to destroy white's center by playing d5, but this is not the right moment to do it. d5 is answered by knight takes d5, knight takes d5, e takes d5, queen takes d5, and after bishop f4, white's position is better, as c7 is under attack, bishop f3 is coming, rook e1 is coming. Even when the center is eliminated, when white's advantage is eliminated, the resulting position is inferior for us. And yeah, we are not fearing e5 that much, as knight e8 is quite solid. We're preparing c5 and d4, and knight c6 as well. So this is a normal position, but against d5, knight takes d5. So this is not the right moment to do it. When we play bishop e7 and white wants to castle on the queen side, sometimes we can play d5 without any preparation. Yeah, d5, for instance, is a great move here. Well, in case of white advancing, we drop back to e8 and we're preparing c5. And here's a very useful trick that will appear in your games for sure, as queen d2 is answered by c5, knight whatever, and d4. Yeah, and we win a piece with this pawn fork. A very useful trick to know. So against e5, knight e8, knight b3 is a good move, so they are trying to capture, and we can play c6, queen d2, knight d7, threatening the pawn on e5, f4, knight c7, covering e6, and after long castle f6. We get rid of this pawn, e takes f6, knight takes f6, and our position is pretty nice. We have nice squares, the bishop is coming to f5, g4 is also available, and I guess black is doing fine. Instead, against f3, d5, e takes d5 can be answered in both ways. Knight takes d5, knight takes d5, queen takes d5, and we have a very nice position. White's king is still in the center, but also playing bishop b4 is worth considering, as the knight is pinned, we are playing knight c3, rook e8, and our initiative is pretty dangerous. Another usual moment when d5 is played very often is against g3. Against g3, d5 is also a pretty logical move, as e takes d5, knight takes d5. We are capturing on c3, and knight takes d5 is completely bad for white, as we are putting pressure on the rook on h1. Yeah, however, e5 is interesting. It's an interesting continuation at g4, but it's worth noting that e6, trying to take advantage of our undefended knights, is simply answered by knight f6, e takes f7, king takes f7, and we complete the development in an easy way, rook e8 or rook f8 and c6 with a normal position. Well, so as you can see, d5 is all over. We are going to play for this idea in plenty of lines. Bishop f4 is considered by some theoreticians the main line against the exchange variation. White is simply trying to play queen d2 and long castle, and there are several ways to face it. Castle, queen d2, and now black can react immediately by playing d5, creating a crazy situation after knight db5, bishop b4. This is super theoretical and plenty of force variations. It is considered better for white, but even though it's worth studying it, if you are like me and don't like this kind of forced stuff, you can play in a different way. c6 followed by castle and d5 seems to be a better way to react. The idea is simple. E takes d5 is answered with knight takes d5, knight takes d5, queen takes d5, and we are attacking on a2 and bringing the rook to d8. I share a variety of chess-related stuff twice a week. If you're into chess, consider subscribing, as it's a great way to support our channel and stay updated. One of the most important characteristics of this position is the semi-open e-file. So rook e8 is a very important move most of the time. Yeah, for instance, I guess bishop e3, bishop f8, putting pressure on e4, we're capturing e4, and f3 is answered by d5. And this is a very nice moment to play d5. Now we are putting pressure on e4 due to the fact that the bishop on e3 is loose. Now, a good way to defend the pawn is by playing f4, bishop f8, and bishop f3. It's a pretty nice way to defend the pawn, as white is not only defending the pawn, but also controlling d5. Yeah, and here we are going to discover one of the main ideas for black in the exchange variation. And I'm talking about c5. Yeah, c5 is a fantastic way to gain space for our pieces. At first it looks bad, as the pawn on d6 is turned into a backward pawn in an open file, but we'll gain enough resources to play d5 most of the time, as you will see. So against knight b3, knight c6, and king h1. Well, the idea is that bishop e3 is met with bishop f5. Yeah, we put pressure on e4 and taking advantage of the fact that e takes f5 runs into rook takes e3. Well, against knight b3, knight c6, king h1, we have a thematic way to put pressure on e4. This is a fantastic idea, actually. a5. Yeah, we want to play a4, a3, and if they avoid it by playing a4, then we manage to get the knight to b4. Yeah, the knight on b4 puts pressure on c2, also controls d5, and prepares bishop d7, bishop c6, and the pawn on e4 is under attack. So this is a pretty standard maneuver that will help us improve in our position. Launching the pawns against a castled king on the queen side is something really typical. And this can be done in several ways. For instance, against queen d2, knight c6 is also really popular. Castle, knight takes d4, queen takes d4, bishop e6, f3, and now a6 as another way to launch black's queenside pawns. The game may continue with g4, b5, h4, c5, queen d2, b4. And this is pretty typical. Yeah, now white has to be careful, as for instance against knight e2, queen a5, it's really tough to meet, a3, and there are several ways to continue. Queen a4, for instance, intending b takes a3, also d5, bringing the bishop to the hunt, and black is doing great. Yeah, against b4, I guess knight a4 can be a better move, but even though queen a5, b3, and c4, and we're trying to open the c file and get some attack against white's king. All in all, there are several ways to launch our pawns. The other dynamic idea that we often find in plenty of variations is knight takes e4. Yeah, for instance, bishop c4, castle, castle. We can destroy white's center by capturing knight takes e4, and recover the pawn with the usual pawn fork. This equalizes after bishop d3, d takes e4, bishop takes e4, knight d7, and we are getting a good position. We are bringing the knight to c5 to put pressure here, and the bishop to f6, and we are equalizing the pawn to c6, so to blockade the diagonal, and we have a nice position as we destroyed white's center. Yeah, it's interesting to mention that against bishop b3, avoiding knight takes e4, we can use the idea of launching the a pawn again. Yeah, the thing is that after castle, we play a4, and in case of bishop takes a4, knight takes e4, as the knight was defending both the knights, as the knight was defending both the bishop and the pawn on e4, and we get a nice position after knight takes e4, rook takes a4. And in case of bishop c4, finally we can play a3, b3, and knight takes e4 again. Knight takes e4, d5, bishop d3, d takes e4, bishop takes e4, and knight d7. And we are going to play knight c5, bishop f6, and gain a very nice position. And something that is pretty nice is that bishop g5, a natural looking move, runs right away into knight takes e4, as we are putting pressure on g5 that is undefended, and knight takes e4 is answered by bishop takes g5, and we win a pawn for nothing. Other line that may occur is bishop takes e7, queen takes e7, and knight d5. And now white is attacking our queen, attacking c7, and preparing queen e2 to pin our knight. But we have the surprising queen e5. Yeah, the idea is that knight takes c7, king d8, knight takes a8 is answered by knight c3, winning the game right away as we win the queen, queen e2, knight takes e2. And against queen e5, knight f3 might be a move, queen takes b2, and again knight takes c7, king d8, knight takes a8, and we get a fierce attack by playing queen c3, Now knight d2 is answered by knight takes d2, and the rook is coming. The knight cannot be captured as the rook is falling. So against queen c3, king e2, we have the nice knight g3, fg3, rook e8, and the king is going to die after knight e5, rook takes e5, king f2, and queen e3. All in all, we have seen the huge flexibility of black. Yeah, black's pieces in the queen side can come to the game in various ways, and this is something that will give you chances to fight for the entire point, and this makes the Philidor exchange variation a very nice choice. I hope you liked it. I hope you use it to win a lot of games, and please leave me your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you very much, and see you next time. Goodbye.